Thank you, Richard.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your story, because I know you're a successful entrepreneur. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, and we'll get started.
Yeah, sure. It's kind of a long and connect the dots journey from, childhood, to recently selling a tech company. And I don't even know anything about writing code, so I don't know how that happened. But I consider myself sort of a hedonistic and opportunistic entrepreneur and incredibly lucky. And, it sort of started in college when I was addicted to Pac-Man. And I'm sitting in a laundromat with a pocket full of quarters and I'm jonesing for a video game, right? And I thought, man, we gotta play some video games. And instead of saying somebody should do something, I called every laundromat in Tucson and I asked them if they had video games. None of them did. And, eventually I said, well, would you like some? And we'll share the revenue. And they said yes. So I started with one machine that was sold at an auction because that's all I could afford, stealing from my, college monies, and grew it from there, eventually putting machines in laundromats all throughout Tucson by the time I graduated. And so that was the lucky part of being at the right place at the right time and having a need that I wanted to fulfill. From there, moved to LA dreaming about producing and directing movies. And of course, that didn't happen, but I did work in television. I worked in travel films and eventually worked my way up to producing stuff. And while I was doing that, there was in Chile, it went from a dictatorship with Pinochet to a democracy. And as a result, they added new TV stations and a new TV network. So opportunity presented itself by the need for content, right? And it was a younger demographic in Chile at the time. And so I flew down, pitched a game show idea that I ripped off from a US show, and pitched, put the show on air in a couple of months, and it was a huge success in Chile. And if you have questions, otherwise I'll keep rambling on, Richard.
One question I wanted to ask is, what are the valuable lessons that you learned in each of these endeavors?
Yeah, I think, one of the things you learn, especially if you have the risk tolerance for being an entrepreneur, is saying yes to things early on and looking at opportunities, not just saying, listen, I have a passion for, this, but it's not really solving a problem, or it's not an opportunity that I think I can take advantage of. Meaning, if I love clothing and I want to open up a boutique shop in Main Street, then the question is that really an opportunity, or is it a problem that people are having? So one, are you solving a problem, or are you making something easier to accomplish, right? Or in the case of the video games, yeah, it was a problem for people like me who had, it was a captive audience at a laundromat and I had quarters. So problem is I wanted to waste the quarters, or actually waste the time so I could spend the quarters. In Chile, the opportunity was they needed content because this was a brand new network, right? But there's also that understanding when I was younger that I didn't have far to fall. Meaning, if it didn't work out, what's the big deal? I didn't have a house, mortgage, family, kids, all of the, things that keep you tied to, I can't take a risk because I can lose too much. So when you're younger, you can take those risks. And so what? You fail, you sleep on somebody's couch for a year or two. I mean, you bounce back. I think the biggest regret would have been, I didn't try that. I didn't leave the US and move to Chile, right? It was an adventure for me.
What do you attribute your longevity success in entrepreneurship?
Really, there's a couple of things. Lucky, obviously, you have to be lucky, being at the right place at the right time, but also a little bit of talent. I don't think I'm that talented, but I am fairly disciplined. And so when you prepare, if you have something, you say yes to every opportunity to find something that works. And then when you find something that you think you can win at, you then say no to everything else, right? And then you have the discipline to create the foundational stuff, the structures, the processes, the procedures, the whole wash, rinse, repeat. Now, it's not like I learned any of this in college. I really started a business. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what a vision was. I didn't know what the culture, when people would say, you got to hire the best people. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I can't even afford to pay myself. What do you mean hire the best people, right? And so I went back to school in my 50s and I got my MBA in entrepreneurship in order to better understand how to properly build the foundation for the company, this tech company that I recently sold.
You talk about, I think you almost went bankrupt. Talk to us about that.
Oh yeah, multiple times. So, when I started the company, I have, these ideas that build it and they will come concept, right? Mindset, if you will. And the challenge is you have to grow to the point where you're mature enough that people take you seriously. One, you have to create a compelling enough product or service that people will go. So early on, when I realized that there was an opportunity, I had to spend money in order to build out the technology. And I would literally got a line of credit on my house, a second mortgage, if you will, to pay the employees and pay the techies, right? And I didn't believe it was going to take as long as it did to succeed. I mean, we were, as they would say, an overnight success after 25 years, right? So we came multiple times to thinking, you know what, I can't pay myself, and I even said to the employees once, either everybody gets a pay cut or I have to start to let people go, you guys vote, and they did. Then there were other challenges where we had, a lawsuit where we had lost, and the suit wasn't a lot, but the arbitration meant we have to pay the lawyers of the other side, which was $1 million. And we did not have $1 million, right? Somebody helped us out because they saw the threat and they saw the opportunity. And literally, I mean, days in my mind of saying, well, I guess that's it. It's over. I'm going to be serving McDonald's and asking you if you want fries with that burger. So, I was mentally destroyed, but I didn't have an option B.
You bootstrap your business to 8 figures. Talk to us about how did you do it?
Well, it started with when I was in Chile, somebody introduced me to virtual reality. They gave me a CD-ROM and you could look up, down, and all around. And I thought, that is the coolest thing ever, right? I don't have to produce travel films with a bunch of guys and all this luggage. I can just take one camera and shoot virtual tours and let the world see these destinations and hotels. Love it, right? So I develop a company, or I set up a company called World Travel Vision to do virtual tours for the travel industry. This is in the mid to late 90s, right? And eventually they say, the hotels and stuff, they say, how do we get these virtual tours on this new World Wide Web thingy? I'm like, I don't know, send them a CD-ROM. I would give them a CD-ROM and they would take it to the trade shows and the conferences, right? And so they said, yeah, there are no standards. They don't know what to do with these CD-ROMs. I'm like, oh, all right, let me see what I can do to help. So one thing leads to another, and I say, okay, let me see how I can help distribute those virtual tours to these new travel websites, right? And eventually I realized that, well, there's dysfunction in photos as well. I mean, virtual tours are nice to have, photos are need to have. And early on, the systems that you would look at, is that hotel available on that date? Yes, and how much? They never had pictures, right? So the websites would have a separate database for pictures. They'd marry the rate and availability and they put it all on the website. So we decided to go from virtual tour production to virtual tour production, then distribution. We take a loss on the production to get the distribution monies, and then eventually pivot again to go almost entirely on photo distribution. And so if you go to any travel website and see pictures of hotels, they probably came from my own servers. So the building really was a knowledge of, I don't know exactly what to do. I didn't know how to structure culture or vision, or I didn't even know what the meaning of a KPI was, right? And so I got a book named Traction, which helped explain a lot. I went back to school to get my MBA, and I slowly started putting the elements together because If I knew how to raise money, I probably would have raised money. And if I would have raised money, I probably would have spent it on stupid things and gone bankrupt, because I wouldn't have learned through the hurdles and the obstacles that I had faced. And I wouldn't got to the nitty gritty and done it from the ground up.
So how was the process from scaling from 6 figures to 7 figures to 8 figures?
Well, the initial scaling was fairly painful. To get a little bit of traction and to have people take you seriously was a challenge, because the real money, at least in the end product, was connecting to everybody. I mean, if you say, listen, I've got this great idea, it'll take your image, size, tag, categorize, translate, and send it everywhere. They go, great. Where can you send it now? Can you get it to Expedia? Well, I'm working on that. Okay, what about Booking? And what about Travelocity? And what about all these other sites? Well, I'm working on that. And you'll say, well, you know what? When you get there, call me. So it's a huge moat, or chicken and egg. You need to connect the Wyndhams and the Hiltons of the world with every travel website on the planet. So when they update in their database and you get those images, you update everywhere else, right? They don't have to think about it in the right sizing category. So the challenge was connecting, right? And convincing people that we can deliver, right? And then the technology working as it should. So the 6-figure was always the hard, because that's the building part where you lay out money in order to get to where you believe you can go. Then beyond that, once you get traction, and listen, this is a software SaaS business, your software is a service. So it's an ongoing thing. Once they're connected to your system and you're integrated with these big hotel groups, it's very hard to uncouple. So it's an ongoing revenue stream, and the rest just flows.
And was the mistakes, did you make any mistakes along the way?
I made a ton of mistakes, sure. I didn't read contracts well. I didn't know the process for hiring. I thought, anybody in different places around the world creates technology. I mean, it was hard for me until I got a CTO in the know to know who was good. You can read somebody's resume and they say, oh yeah, I'm experienced in this type of programming language. Okay, great. And they may not be that experienced, right? And you don't really know, because you don't have the methodology in order to validate that, right? You get a CTO and then you understand, and then you say, okay, what are the KPIs, the key performance indicators we need to put in place to understand where we're growing, to understand that we're not just throwing numbers out there, but the numbers make sense, right? The net profits, so the margins, if you will, and things like that.
I think you issued some stocks to your employees. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So early on, some of the key employees, they were awesome, right? And I realized that, and I realized we didn't have the money to pay them what they probably would have gotten paid elsewhere. So they were worth more. And I told them that. And I said, listen, I'll give you what's called phantom shares in the company. And that means that you have some shares that are only payable when I sell the company, and I plan to sell the company, right? So if you let's for argument's say you have 5% phantom shares, then when I sell the company, you get 5% of that sale, right? And it goes in tranches, meaning you will collect it over 2 years. So the acquiring company says, listen, I like this guy, Richard, but I don't want to give him a big paycheck. And then he walks away and he's got all this, he knows all the functionality and the systems. No, Richard's going to stay because he gets paid out every 6 months. And if he wants that phantom stock paid in full, he's going to be there for the 2 years. Now, if you fire Richard, he gets the full amount. If Richard leaves, he forfeits that amount, and that goes to me, right? The majority shareholder of the company. And that also meant that they didn't have to deal with tax issues every year if they were equity stakeholders, like profit and loss. It only triggered on the event of a sale. And if they left the company, then they'd forfeit their phantom stock.
What would you say is, what did you learn in regards to life and business in general?
More than not, I think that I probably took things way too serious, and I probably lost a lot of sleep and stress. And I'd like to say I lost hair, but I still have hair. worrying about things that I should not have worried about or that I could not control. You know, I think that if you just go by the sort of adage, wash, rinse, repeat, learn, educate, surround yourself with motivational and inspiring people, eventually good things are going to happen. You know, if you're looking for opportunity to find you, you need to be lucky, you need to have a little bit of talent, and you need to be prepared. But if you're lucky and you're not prepared, you may never see opportunity. Or if you're prepared and you're not lucky, you may not see opportunity. So all of these things play in the end, right? So prepare what you're doing, have a solid foundation for building and scaling a company, whatever it is, solve a problem, right? And Jesus, hope you're lucky.
So what would you say if someone is making a career as an entrepreneur, let's say 40 years or 50 years, what would be some main stuff that they should pay attention to?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, are you solving a problem? I mean, what is it you're trying to accomplish? Is this a problem that you have and other people might have? Good. And you can solve it better? You may have a business, right? Or are you improving something that already exists? Like, you know, the fact that I was delivering photos for hotels, that didn't exist before. So good for me, right? I didn't know that because I wasn't in that business. And, you know, the fact that I was doing virtual tours and they asked me to distribute on this new technology called the internet, I figured it all out, right? So solve something, surround yourself with like-minded people, right? People that will inspire you and motivate you. And learn, you know, don't just say, I'm going to build it and they will come. No, it's really hard to let people know that this service or this business exists and that you're going to be around long enough for them to take you seriously. Because if you got a great product and they say, okay, great, Richard, I like what you're doing, but I don't know if you're going to be here next year. So I don't want to put I don't want to spend a little bit of money on your service if you're going to go bankrupt. So, you know, call me in a year and let me know how it's going, you know.
What do you say to people who have a problem embracing change and evolving?
I mean, listen, nowadays change is happening so fast, and with AI coming down, it's happening even faster, and it's going to continue to accelerate. Change is inevitable with the technologies speeding progress up at crazy speeds. I mean, the things AI is doing today, it's in its infancy. So what's going to be happening in the next decade and beyond is going to be beyond our imagination, you know, with AI agents and AI's ability to do things that we didn't think possible.
Where can people find you on social or the internet?
I think the best place, I created a website. I recently published a book that I'm developing into a TV series simply because that was a passion I had 40 years ago and now I can. So I'm sort of going full circle. And the website is called mariethestory.com. And it has information on the book, on the series, on my link. It's got links to my LinkedIn page, my Facebook page, and my Instagram page. So if they go to mariethestory.com, they'll get all kinds of information.
All right. Any last words you would like to add in regards to everything we talked about?
Yeah, I think, you know, from an entrepreneur perspective, it's be patient. It takes time. Nobody builds a business. There's very, very, very few that succeed overnight. And plant a lot of seeds and water them, and a few will grow, and then focus on them.
What about, I'm going to add something else. What about handling failures after failures after failures?
Well, you know, obviously we fail all the time. It's just a matter of minimizing the pain and, more importantly, learning why it did not work and trying to avoid that type of issue in the future, right? Why did it not work out for me? What can I learn? You know, how do I overcome it in the future?